The University of Texas reportedly has an NIL collective budget of $35 to $40 million for the 2025 college football season. Nico Iamaleava decided $2.4 million was not enough for him and pushed for Tennessee to give him $4 million after getting blown out in the first round of the college football playoffs, a game he and others reportedly threatened to sit out of due to NIL disputes. Michigan is giving Bryce Underwood, a 17-year-old, $10.5 to $12 million to flip his commitment from LSU to Ann Arbor. And the number of transfers in both college basketball and football is exploding year after year, with some players jumping to a new team every single season. But before NIL was introduced just 4 years ago, none of this was possible. It's hard to remember a time before the wild, wild west of NIL, but players receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars before 2019 would be the biggest sports scandal of the year. Now, it's just the average price to get a decent offensive lineman to transfer to your program. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for college athletes finally getting what they deserve for the revenue they generate for the NCAA and their schools. But the lack of regulation in NIL has caused a myriad of problems for everyone involved, including us as the viewers. The slow breakdown of team culture has made it difficult for fans to connect with their teams. Before the 2000s, you could expect players who committed to your program out of high school to be on your team for 4 years before graduating or turning pro. This led to many school legends being born, like Christian Laettner for Duke, Larry Bird for Indiana State, and Patrick Ewing for Georgetown. Players were expected to develop their skills to be NBA ready, but the one-and-done era of college basketball, beginning in 2006, flipped this on its head, as top players could declare for the draft after only playing a single season in college, and as NBA teams shifted from drafting experience to drafting raw upside. However, college football players still need to be 3 years removed from high school to declare for the NFL draft, as the physical threshold is much higher in football. So commitments were still a huge deal. That at least was the case until the explosion of the transfer portal. Your team recruits a player but doesn't start him as a true freshman? Whoops, he's out the door to another school that will pay him and overpromise playtime. You start him as a true freshman and give him more money than a 20-year-old has ever seen. Well, he still wants more money and will get it elsewhere. As fans, we love our teams, but it's difficult to feel connected with the players when so many of them are transferring in and out every single year that you have to learn an entirely new team each and every season. Again, just to reiterate, I'm not angry with the student athletes, as many of them won't turn pro and they're getting their money while they can. But something like this should not be allowed to happen in college sports. The transfer portal has turned into free agency, and we forget that these kids are still going to school. But what quality of education can you be getting when you flip schools every single year? I'll end this point by just quickly mentioning basketball player AJ Storr, who you may know if you're a fan of St. John's, or Wisconsin, or Kansas, or Ole Miss. He played for 4 different high schools before matching that number in college, and he's just one of many mercenaries in college sports. But really, can you blame him? Kansas reportedly paid him $750,000 for his services, and I'm sure he's getting a pretty penny to move to Ole Miss. I want to show you this article really quick. I am an Indiana basketball fan, and this was the state of my team, and other teams, right when the portal opened. I'm literally going to spend the first few games next year not knowing who the hell I'm even rooting for. It's insane. Personally, I root for anyone who dons the cream and crimson, as I'm loyal to the program. But I don't think I'm alone in missing a time when you could root for a player throughout their collegiate career, which is becoming a rarity instead of the norm. This introduction of the mass exodus of players has also opened up a whole new can of worms that affects both the players and teams alike: broken deals and absurd inequality. The lack of standardized contracts have led to a number of alleged overpromises and underdeliveries. Matthew Sluka, the quarterback of UNLV, led the Runnin' Rebels to a 3-0 start before shocking the nation and announcing he would be redshirting, as he alleged UNLV was not holding up their end of the NIL bargain. Sluka says he transferred from Holy Cross to UNLV after he was promised $100,000, but was only given a $3,000 relocation stipend. Jaden Rashada is currently suing Billy Napier and Florida after allegedly being stiffed $13.85 million, receiving just $150,000 before decommitting from Florida. While we won't know the truth until the conclusion of the lawsuit, I think it's inevitable for contracts to become the norm in college athletics. But until then, misunderstandings and broken promises will continue to run rampant. Now looking over to the inequality of NIL. It makes sense that the big blue chip programs have access to more funds for NIL and are able to shell out the big bucks to recruit top-end talent from high school. And while the biggest recruits have almost always gone to the best programs, this has now bled into the ever-growing transfer portal. In the past, we have seen players rise up from out of nowhere and put mid-majors on the map in both basketball and football. But now, after a player has a solid year for their smaller program, the bigger programs can just swoop in and offer them obscene amounts of money to transfer out. This could be a key reason we saw very little parity in March Madness this year, with no mid-major teams even making it out of the round of 32. I know I'm going to sound like a broken record throughout this video, as it's awesome to see guys who are underlooked in the recruiting scene ball out, secure themselves life-changing money, and an opportunity to play for a top team. But this makes it nearly impossible for any mid-major to ever compete for a real championship. Great teams and stories like Butler would never be possible in today's landscape, as the team would get picked apart after one successful year. This has caused some debate over implementing a salary cap, as spending on NIL is increasing year over year to unsustainable levels. This would potentially limit top-end players' earning potentials in college, but if we're being real, those top-end players end up making it to the league more often than not, and this would go a long way in stopping the gap between big and small schools from widening even more than it already has. Nick Saban understood the changes that were happening around him, and he hung it up as the game he loved turned into something unrecognizable. High school players receiving 8-figure offers would have been laughable 5 years ago, but now it's just becoming the norm to land a top quarterback recruit. The pushback against NIL should not be misconstrued as people being against college athletes receiving compensation, because that isn't the root issue, and I'm sure most reasonable people don't give a shit about athletes finally being able to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. While it feels like NIL has been around for a while, it's still an extremely new implementation that just needs time to work out the kinks because it isn't going anywhere. Once you start paying athletes, it's pretty difficult to close that Pandora's box. I believe if solid regulatory measures are put into place, such as a salary cap, limits on transfers, or contracts, then NIL can become something that makes every party involved happy. But for the time being, with none of these measures being made, these outrageous NIL budgets, broken deals, inequality, and breakdown of the system we have all come to love will just continue to get worse and worse.